watch these players do battle here. Klomparens, we did see her make the top 8 at New Jersey when you and Matthias were doing coverage of our first Open Series event with Khans of Tarkir. She was playing Jeskai then, she's playing Jeskai now. Different version, though. She'll start things off with the Mystic Monastery. You see Kleinknecht start things off with a Nomad Outpost. Rather, we're 6 underway here.
And when Jadine played this deck in New Jersey, she had a lot of proactive creature pumps to be using, Titan Strength, God's Willing, and so forth. The old Mantis Rider build. She still has a slight element of that going on here with one main deck copy of Defiant Strike, which you rarely see, but a cheap spell and something that plays very well with creatures.
Here's a Flooded Strand. Turn 3 is normally when the ball gets rolling for this deck. So the Klomparens will go down to 19. We'll see what it's time to set up here. There's a Plains. Is it time for Ascendancy? Perhaps a Rabble Master, maybe even a Whirling Outburst.
I've seen different players approach what they want to be doing on the third turn very differently. I know there's some players that almost always stick Ascendancy, even if the coast is clear for something like Rabble Master. She didn't going to go with the Whirling Outburst here, probably a concession to the removal spells she can likely anticipate from Evan's side of the table.
Rabble Master the draw here for Evan. 3 mana, and there's a Whirling Outburst for him. So both players with 3 Goblin tokens. And it will be a passing of the turn. We'll go back Klomparens' way. Klomparens will untap and draw. It's time for a Mystic Monastery. And perhaps maybe into the red zone we go. Maybe trading goblins, we'll see. Well, there is a Rabble Master, so an additional goblin will be generated, and into the red zone we go. 3 goblins will trade on each side of the table, and damage will come through. Kleinknecht will go down to 19. Looks like it's maybe time for him to cast his Rabble Master. So a lot of goblins on the battlefield this game, that's for sure.
The pacing of this sort of game generally will favor the person on the play here, since it's likely Jadine can follow this up with a kill spell for Evan's Rabble Master and start leveraging a pretty huge advantage.
Evan's goblin did come into play and got eaten by Jadine's Rabble Master. Coast was certainly clear for that block. And see, this is the interesting thing about Rabble Master versus a card like Monastery Mentor, where, you know, players have talked about Monastery Mentor is just going to kind of take Goblin Rabble Master out. Well, it's pretty tough to just take Goblin Rabble Master out. Here's a Stoke the Flames, because they can do things like this that Monastery Mentor cannot do.
Yep, and this is the problem that I think Mardu has in the matchup is once Ascendancy is in play, random removal spells just don't matter that much.
Yeah. Now here's a very healthy attack. Of course, those creatures all got pumped from Jeskai Ascendancy, and now Rabble Master gets trigger, a bunch of damage coming across, and now for Evan, he's being attacked from 2 angles. One is exactly what Goblin Rabble Master is doing along with all of its tokens, as he drew a Lightning Strike for the turn, but now there's an Ascendancy out there too.
So even if he's able to contain this board, which is questionable, there's the long-term implications of what's his path to win this game when Jadine's draws are going to be so much better than his over time.
And there is a Lightning Strike and just a passing of the turn, so Jadine will untap and draw. She's able to make sure that everything she finds is pretty good now, thanks to Jeskai Ascendancy.
She just has no bad draws for the rest of the game.
Yeah. Tapping 2 mana now. Perhaps it's time to Stoke yet again. Looks like it is. Gonna go upstairs, trigger the Ascendancy. Draw and discard. Discarding another copy of Jeskai Ascendancy. Those goblins are 2/2s now. The follow-up is going to be a Treasure Cruise. This is a heck of a turn.
Yep.
3 cards coming here in just a moment. She's going to draw and discard first. We'll have to, of course, remove some cards for Delve. So she will take care of 7 of those. So there they go. Secretly was discarded, of course, to the Ascendancy. Now Treasure Cruise will resolve. So there were exactly 7 cards, so no harm done. 3 cards drawn. Goblins are each 3 power at this point, mind you. And there is a land, and here's an attack. And that is going to do it. So Jadine Klomparens is going to win game number 1 here over Evan Kleinknecht. Jeskai tokens up a game here over Mardu mid-range and in very impressive fashion.
The decks are just not playing by the same rules once Jeskai Ascendancy is involved. That's all that game comes down to. Evan's got cards in his deck like Sorin that are really good if Jadine's playing an honest game, but once Ascendancy is in play, the power level of those cards just can't compete.
Well, there's nothing honest about Jeskai Ascendancy. I think we all know that.
No. The deck is good. I believe the deck is good in every matchup when it has Ascendancy unchecked. The question is the matchup good when you don't have Ascendancy? I think the Mardu matchup is okay for the Mardu side, but unfortunately the Jeskai deck is going to have Ascendancy some percentage of the time, and then you're in a really big hole.
We'll start by taking a look at Evan's Mardu sideboard, where you'll find a Liliana Vest, 2 copies of Chandra Power Master, 2 Erase, an Elspeth Sun's Champion, 2 copies of Hostilities, a Glare of Heresy, 3 copies of Thoughtseize, and 3 Anger of the Gods. Actually has a lot of nice options here.
This is great. I mean, Evan here gets to make a full swap into a control deck with a lot of answers for Jeskai Ascendancy. So I think you're going to want the Anger of the Gods, the Thoughtseizes, the Hostilities, the Glare of Heresy, the Erases, maybe even going deep enough to something like Chandra, cut all the random aggressive elements out of his deck and become a pure control deck in the matchup with a lot of answers to Jeskai Ascendancy. It does mean that he's kind of exposed to Treasure Cruise because the game's going to go on for a very long time, but he has so many powerful trumps that he may be able to overpower Jadine even if she's able to resolve a Treasure Cruise.
On the other side of things for Jadine, her Jeskai Tokens deck, what do we see in the sideboard there?
3 copies of Glare of Heresy, 2 Erase, 3 Disdainful Stroke, 3 Anger of the God, 3 Bramaz, 1 Negate. I think this is a pretty reasonable Bramaz matchup because Evan has Anger of the Gods, Lightning Strikes, a lot of 3 damage removal. Not unreasonable, you could have Bioblight as well, so I think Bramaz is a good thing to bring in here. Past that, there's a couple different options. She can bring in her own copies of Anger and try to win the game that way. Can bring in Disdainful Strokes for some of the big cards like Stormbreath Dragon, maybe Elspeth that she can anticipate here. I think the 3 copies of Glare of Heresy are probably going to be reasonable here against Planeswalkers, Butcher of the Horde, and so forth. And the 1 copy of Negate, but I don't know how much she wants to dilute her deck. I think the 3 copies of Bramaz are the best cards she brings to the table post-board, however.
Well, a lot of these players do sideboard and get ready here for game number 2. Jeskai Tokens, clearly a popular deck. Yu Watanabe had a fantastic performance with that at the World Championships, and Dylan Donegan did win the Season 4 Invitational with that. And of course, when you win an Invitational, you get a token, and if you didn't see Dylan's at the Players Championship, you can see it right now, an Elemental token for Young Pyromancer.
Pretty awesome looking, a little less burly looking than the Chris Van Meter Elemental token, but that stands to reason.
Dylan, a youngster, 17-year-old from North Carolina, Season 4 Invitational Champion, $10,000 richer, and of course does have this Elemental token to his name right now. And of course, what's really cool about this is we'll be giving these tokens away when you win an Invitational in many different ways now. They'll be available worldwide starting in 2015, which means right now with each online order over $5 and given to all Open Series and Premier IQ competitors, which means if you came to the Open Series this weekend, you got the Tom Ross token now.
Yeah, we're going to be cycling in different tokens at different times. Right now, if you compete in any of our events or make an online order $5 or above, you will get a Tom Ross Vampire token.
Of course, Tom did get this from winning the Season 3 Invitational. That one is very nifty and useful with Sorin. So you can look to get that one right now. We'll be working Dylan's in soon enough. And of course, whoever wins the Season 1 Invitational, well, they'll have one too. And for me, if I were to win an Invitational, which I won't since I don't play in them, I would make a Monk token because I would want Prowess.
You'd want a Monk token?
Yeah, I'd be a Monk with Prowess. And
That's pretty cool.
I know I'd get a lot of play.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's what I would be. I'm still waiting for someone to do Master of Waves. A little disappointed no one's decided to be a 1/0 Elemental tokens. I want to see what the artists can do as far as making that, but I would be a Monk now if I got to choose.
You want to be a Seahorse Elemental?
That's
asking a lot.
That's not what I said.
That's asking a lot for the artist to take certain creative liberties.
As I've explained before, clearly you're old, so your memory is shot. I like Hydro Man from Spider-Man. He's one of my favorite villains, so I would like to be drawn like Hydro Man. That's all. I want to see him do it.
He is comfortably a tier 3 or worse
Oh, he's
Spider-Man
way
villain.
down. He's way down the pole. Like the episode of Spider-Man when I was a kid, like the cartoon with Hydro Man, very easy to defeat because he's not a very tough villain.
Right.
Go into the sun or something.
He's got a lot of really pronounced weaknesses and not a lot of great powers.
Yeah, but if you're in a sewer, you're in trouble.
You are in trouble.
I'm not entirely sure why you're in a sewer, but
I'm a fan of the Enforcer, so far be it for me to critique your love of Hydro Man, but that is an odd villain to choose from.
who's the Enforcer?
It's a group of villains, Fancy Dan, Montana, and Ox. They appeared very early on. They were like kind of bootleg mobsters. They worked for the Green Goblin in a couple issues.
Oh, they sound tough.
Yeah, one of them is he's into like karate or something.
Okay.
One of them's an expert with the lasso, and the other one's just kind of big. That's Ox.
I'm going to assume. Yeah, I was going to assume that Ox is the big one.
Yep.
Very nice.
Montana, I think, is the lassoer, and then Fancy Dan is the karate master.
Nice. These sound like some really affordable foes for Spider-Man.
Spider-Man rarely had much difficulty defeating them.
That sounds like this is the worst group of villains ever.
They're not great.
Ox's superpower, I'm big.
Yeah, he's pretty big.
Nice. I go to the gym a bunch, so I'm a super villain.
Yeah, anyone can be Ox, really.
Sure. I'm going to look this up after this round is over, just so you know. I'm going to Google Ox and see what I find.
That's why it's funny to me in, online fantasy games where people choose to be a human warrior. It's like, you can do that in real life. You just walk out of your house with some armor on and go on adventures. You don't need to be doing it. You don't need to be playing a video game to do that.
Both players will start with the Tri-Land. I didn't know I was in Diablo. That's cool.
Yeah, you can just go ahead
in the video game.
I mean, if you have a sword out, they'll probably arrest you at some point. But essentially, you can go and do this right now if you really wanted to.
Battlefield Forge for both players before passing the turn. But again, both players normally get the action started on turn number 3, though it doesn't look like Evan will be. Third land looks to be a temple. Little scry action here, though lightning strike at the ready to perhaps kill something.
I'm curious how Evan approached the sideboarding here because he has so many different ways to sideboard here. He can keep his deck mostly intact and just shave out some less powerful cards for some more powerful cards, or he can really bail on a bunch of creatures and become a pure control deck.
Raise the alarm will make 2 soldiers. And for 2 will come Jadine. Up a game and looking to win this one. Move on to 6-0. Off to a nice start. Land number 3 comes into play tapped for her, though. Temple of Epiphany will put the top card to the bottom, and we'll go back Kleinknecht's way. Thoughtseize looks to be the draw. And here is a Goblin Rabblemaster. That is in there. No lightning strikes, so an attack for 1. So we'll see if Jadine has an answer to this. Never good to let that thing go unchecked.
And I think that there's a reasonable chance that that was Disdainful Stroke / Negate being held up last turn, and Rabblemaster ignores both of those.
Well, there's a mountain. That'll be land number 4. 3 mana here. Rabblemaster for Jadine. Goblin token coming in. Time to attack. Rabblemaster will eat something. Either a soldier or a goblin will eat a goblin token. Probably better to get that thing off the table, given Goblin Rabblemaster's text. And we'll head back Evan's way. Evan will draw. Glare of Heresy. No 4th land just yet, but some useful spells there in Thoughtseize and Glare, along with Lightning Strike, so he'll fire that off. I'm a little interested in the tapping of mana there. The ability to cast Thoughtseize and Lightning Strike in this turn is something he's passed up on.
Yeah, I think that's just a mistapping there from Evan, especially given how mana tight he is. He would have been a lot better served just Lightning Striking and then Thoughtseizing that turn.
There's an attack for 2. Klomparens is down to 13. Evan gonna get a little lower. He's down to 14. There's land number 5 for Jadine. And this will be an Anger of the Gods. So actually both players have Anger of the Gods after sideboard.
And I'm not a huge fan of Jadine going down that road here because I think she's not as well suited to play this kind of game as Evan is. Evan's deck is really equipped to be a control deck. He's got a bunch of Planeswalkers and a lot more removal.
Here's a Thoughtseize. Jadine's plan may be, I can cast Anger of the Gods and work my way towards just overpowering you with Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, that's the one thing that can justify this sort of sideboarding for Jadine is the presence of Treasure Cruise in his deck. But now, that's likely to be selected here, and then she's going to be left with a hand of Hordeling Outburst and Anger of the Gods, which is a good summary of the awkwardness of where she's at right now.
Combo. Well, not entirely.
No. Combo depending on the order in which you cast them.
There you go. Well, there is an Outburst. 3 Goblin tokens coming in. So that's done resolving. And now passing of the turn. We'll go back Evan's way. Goblin Rabblemaster the draw. He's still stuck on mana, but he's got plenty of powerful spells. Just has to decide how he wants to sequence them.
I like sticking the Rabblemaster here because it's likely good enough that Jadine has to Anger the Gods it away unless she drew a removal spell. In which case, you get the Hordeling Outburst and the Anger of the Gods out of her hand with the 1 card. And then you have 4 or 5 spells left over in your hand to try to win the game with.
Yeah, there is a real tension with having Hordeling Outburst and Anger of the Gods together.
And Raise the Alarm.
Yeah.
And Goblin Rabblemaster.
Bit of a tension.
Yeah.
Jadine does have a few cards in hand right now, though. And may have to cast Anger of the Gods, even though she doesn't want to, just because Goblin Rabble Master can have that kind of effect on the game. Now here's 3 mana. Let's see what this is going to be. Going to change the way she taps the mana. Rabble Master. So going to try to go down this road. Here's an attack here for 4. 1 creature will die, of course. 3 damage will come through. Back to Evan. Chain to the Rocks to draw. An interesting one.
Nice.
There's not, I just realized there's not a mountain in play. Your eyes are right on top of it.
I know this because Evan scryed one of these to the bottom earlier in the game.
Both these decks are full of combos.
Yeah. Not firing on all cylinders right now.
And now here's Anger of the Gods to kill all the Goblin tokens again.
I mean, this looks weird, but if I'm in Evan's spot here, all I want to do is just play a longer game here. He's got a lot of action left in his hand, so he's just got to make his land drops.
There's a Temple. Take a look at the top card. It becomes the bottom one here for Klomparens. We're going to pass the turn back. I mean, Evan draws a 4th land here. He might be in the driver's seat. Hey, hey!
Nice.
Now that is a Bloodstained Mire, which can search up a mountain for Chain to the Rocks.
Now, a problem here, I'm sure Evan would have preferred to be able to play the Butcher and hit in one turn with some lifelink here, because he is at risk of being burned out. The special land drops him to 8, and Jadine's been up to very little, so it's very possible she has 2 4-damage spells in her hand, and Evan doesn't get to untap.
Yeah, Jeskai Charm, Stoke the Flames, all options right now. And that fetch land, as powerful as it is, able to help Evan fix his mana, find a mountain here for Chain to the Rocks. Does deal a point of damage, which puts him in double 4 damage spell range. Doesn't look like Jadine has one right now. So there's Butcher of the Horde. There's a Clever Heresy. That'll take care of the 5/4 flyer. Both players are sideboarded into very reactive decks.
But at this point, you have to feel like Jadine's got a slight edge, just because it's hard for Evan to gain life, and probably hard for him to kill Jadine very quickly.
Butcher of the Horde number 2, Clever Heresy number 2. Your turn. Anger of the Gods the draw. Back Jadine's way.
She also has Treasure Cruise as a huge draw here as well.
One could argue the best draw. Here's Hordling Outburst. 3 goblins are going to come in. Pass the turn back. Erase the draw there for Evan. Anger of the Gods going to clear up those tokens. This is a negate, so no, they won't. Back Klomparens' way. In for 3. Puts you to 5. See what kind of follow-up we have. She's reaching. Jeskai Ascendancy. There's an erase to get that off of the table. Take a draw. Rabble Master. Well, that's something to cast.
Though not ideal here, again, you know, this is not great for blocking this turn, and Evan is dangerously close to getting burned out.
And perhaps Evan was maybe supposed to pull the trigger on one of those, that Chain to the Rocks.
I was about to say, falling to 3 here is very dangerous.
See Jadine separate things in such a fashion. She knows one Goblin token is going to die. Two of them will get through. Put Evan down to 3. If she does want to make this stack with both creatures, with all 3 creatures, excuse me. Looks like she will. Got to block 1. Doesn't look like we have a burn spell just yet here for Klomparens. Separating some mana though.
Maybe another copy of Anger of the Gods. That would explain the hesitation.
Yeah. Yep, there it is. Clear everything up again. The follow-up for Maz, not bad.
And Evan definitely got paid off here for holding that Chain of the Rocks.
That's for sure.
The way things played out, this was great for him. It was a big risk.
Now here's 5 mana. There's Sarkhan. And I actually kind of like this play too, because he gets to use all of his mana this turn and then start to attack the next turn.
Yeah.
And can save the other stuff now for a little bit later.
You really don't care about your Planeswalker being at 1 either, because anything that kills it just kills you instead. So
most likely, yeah.
Who cares?
You know, things would get a touch awkward there if Jadine were to draw a Rabble Master, because then the Goblin could take care of Sarkhan, but that didn't happen. So here's an attack for 4. Jadine's going to go down to 5. She needs a burn spell. She needs one quick. There's another land. Pass the turn back. Line echo draw. Take it up. Move it in. Put you to 1. Temple of Triumph. Take a look at the top card. Case of Coils will become the bottom card. Can Klomparens peel a burn spell? She's going to cast a Raise the Alarm.
I don't think this changes very much.
Not a ton. It's burn spell or bust.
I guess now Rabble Master is a kill.
Sure. Doesn't look like it's a way to win. Put you down to not yet. Well, that's a sorcery.
Yep.
So I'm afraid I've got some bad news there. But Evan is down to 1, but 1 is not none. Sarkhan's going to tick up. That's an attack for lethal, and that's going to get the job done. So Evan Kleinknecht is going to tie things up here against Jadine Klomparens. It's 1-1 here in Mardu mid-range against Jeskai Tokens, which means we're heading to a 3rd game here.
And now, especially with JD being on the play, I think that she needs to get pretty far away from how reactive her deck was post-board. I think that Evan's Mardu deck is capable of overpowering her if the game goes on for a very long time, even with Jadine having access to Treasure Cruise. So the Anger of the Gods were incredibly awkward for Jadine there. Every time she was casting them, it was either on a fairly innocuous board on Evan's side or sweeping away some of her own stuff. I think she's much better served positioning herself as a purely aggressive deck in the matchup.
I think she wants to be as proactive as possible, because if you're in a matchup where I'm being proactive or being reactive and we're trading resources and I have Treasure Cruise and you don't, I feel as though it favors Jadine there.
For sure. And you want to also punish Evan for having Thoughtseize in his deck too.
Yep.
I mean, the more that you're aggressive, the more that you have the ability to top deck lethal burn spells, the more that Thoughtseize is going to come back to harm him.
Well, let's talk about the Complete Commander, authored by Benny Smith. For our Commander fans out there, an unofficial guide to the format, now updated with Commander 2014.
Benny Smith, a long-time writer for Star City Games and a casual enthusiast for a very long time, a person with a lot of Commander experience under his belt, very well suited to write an unofficial guide here to give you all sorts of information about different Commander strategies, different Commanders to explore, and it's been updated for 2014, available on PDF at starcitygames.com/complete commander.
A very, very fun format. I imagine he's going to keep updating this book, much like we've seen with Next Level Magic as well, because there will be a new Commander set every year, at least one.
On top of that, you know, most sets offer at least a couple cards to influence the format.
Yeah.
Either legendary creatures you can build around, or cards that are explicitly templated for multiplayer. There's a lot to like.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of cards like Will of the Council, for example. Cards like
Yes.
Council's Judgment, where Commander is certainly in mind, and it is a really, really sweet format. It's not one we see on the Open Series, of course, but it is a lot of fun to play casually and with your friends. And we see a lot of players doing that after events like Pro Tours and Grand Prix as well.
Yeah. No, it's a very cool format and something that can bond competitive players and casual players. Not a lot of things get to do that. But even Glenn Jones, who's one of the spikiest spikes who's ever spiked, he loves Commander, you know? Not a lot of formats allow you to do that.
We wish Glenn Jones well, as he is headed to Wizards of the Coast to begin editing starting next week.
A well-deserved opportunity for him.
And we actually ran into a Wizards of the Coast employee here while in between rounds, Adam Prozac.
Just hanging out in his old stomping grounds here in Columbus. Home for the holidays, flying out to Seattle, I believe, tomorrow or Monday.
Yeah.
Just hanging out.
Multiple-time Open Series champion.
Getting his cube on. Part of some pretty iconic Open Series highlights.
Absolutely. But he's doing what he loves now, designing the game. I hope that he is responsible for Treasure Cruise so I can yell at him.
When Treasure Cruise goes to print, it's not one person's responsibility.
Oh, you don't put the blame on one person.
It's a lot of different people's responsibility.
Okay. Game designer Patrick knows.
Yep. There's a very long spiel I can get here about risk assessment and all that. I'll save it for another time.
Gonna pump the brakes. Perhaps that's something for the podcast.
If one person goes, I think this is acceptable at 8, and the whole room goes, yeah, sure, it's not the fault of the person who suggested it at 8. Or it's not exclusively that person's fault.
They get like 60% of the blame.
It's all collective.
Okay.
We share the praise. We also share the absence of praise, the critiques.
Sure.
It's all part of the same thing.
Game design seems very difficult.
Yeah, but if you keep your eyes on the right macro concepts, you can mess up some things in the details and still be fine.
Okay.
As long as you have, your core tenets and you stick to them, even if, maybe certain cards get released a little too good or not quite as good as you anticipated, then it's going to be fine.
What is the bigger mistake? Jace the Mind Sculptor or Skull Clamp?
Skull Clamp. Because at least Jace's heart is in the right place of let's make a super splashy, iconic Planeswalker, one of our storyline characters, mythic rare. It's going to drive sales, be awesome for people who are fans of Jace. That's at least its heart is in the right place in certain respects. Skull Clamp is a freaking uncommon. No one went to the store and bought Darksteel packs looking to crack a Skull Clamp. That's not a thing that happened.
It's funny because most of the people who are probably watching this and most people playing the tournament never played during Skull Clamp's heyday. I'm using heyday lightly since it got banned almost immediately.
Also, what's more fun for the average player? Having the super sweet Planeswalker in play that can do a million different things and feel super powerful, or killing your own creatures to draw more creatures of your own that you'll kill? What's more fun? It's the first thing.
Depends on who you are.
I'll answer for you. It's the first thing. It's not the second thing.
I like to call it Skill Clamp.
Right.
That's what it is.
Also, at least Jace is vulnerable to just random attackers.
If
I go creature on 1, creature on 2, creature on 3, Jace is not very good in those games, or is often not very good in those games.
Sure.
Whereas if I go, here's a Savannah Lion, here's a Grizzly Bear, and you have Skull Clamp, I'm probably in really big trouble. So there's that too. I always felt Jace was a little overrated, and it was a bigger consequence of there were too many cards in that format that made aggressive strategies bad, rather than Jace is intrinsically overpowered. Like, yes, Jace is super, super powerful, but I think there's a reasonable number of standard formats that could handle that if you had enough good burn spells, enough good haste creatures. It's possible it could be inside of the realm of possibility. Whereas Skull Clamp, almost no matter what's going on, is going to be a disaster.
Yeah, completely busted. But they did print a lot of artifact removal then. So.
Yep. Which is not that helpful when the artifact deck ignores removal really well, and Skull Clamp by itself will draw 4 cards the turn it comes into play, even if you untap and shatter it.
Ah, yes. Perhaps a problem. Different times 2004 were.
Yeah,
that was over a decade ago since 2015. That was over a decade ago.
An old R&D member, friend of mine, Matt Place, used to say, all right, you have an Arcbound Ravager and another artifact in play, and I've got an Electrostatic Bolt and a Shatter. What happens? And the Infinity player goes, nothing happens. Your cards don't work. That's a pretty bad spot to be in. All right, I have 3 Shatters in play. What happens? All right, you lose next turn.
Yeah. 6 cards apiece for both of these players, as they've each taken a mulligan. And Jadine doesn't look thrilled, but she's going to keep, as will Evan. Nomad Outpost. And a Mystic Monastery to get things started off. Temple Epiphany, a little scry action here for Jadine. Top card becomes the bottom. We'll head back Evan's way. Chain to the Rocks is the draw. There is a mountain. There's the combo. Pass the turn back. Mountaineer for Jadine. Any turn 3 action?
A lot of really good plays here.
It's a Hordeling Outburst, perhaps the best play.
Well, against the hand of Murderous Cut, Crackling Doom, Chain to the Rocks, that's a really good place to start. And even if Evan has Anger of the Gods in his hand, she probably has to work through it at some point anyway, so this is a great opening. It's possible this is really problematic for his hand, and as it turns out, it is.
Tempo of Silence, scries the top card to the bottom. Hordeling Outburst going to cause some trouble this game. It's time to attack for 3. Kleinknecht going to go down to 17. See what Klomparens going to follow up with. It'll be a copy of Jeskai Ascendancy, but the erase will take care of that right away. So no value gained from that, just a simple 1-for-1 trade. Hordeling Outburst, the draw here for Kleinknecht. So it looks like he wants 3 goblins as well, so he's going to get them.
And the last 2 turns have been pretty good news for Evan. Being able to cash in his erase there for Jadine's entire turn, and now having a Hordeling Outburst to ideally trade with Jadine's.
Yeah, not too bad at all. And Jadine has missed the land drop. So perhaps a little bottlenecked at this point, but one thing to keep in mind too is for Evan, is here's another copy of Jeskai Ascendancy and just a passing of the turn, is a lot of his cards actually exile Jadine stuff, which is pretty important.
Definitely. I mean, with Evan sideboarding into as controlling of a deck as it looks like he has, the biggest problem is probably Treasure Cruise, because he can trade 1-for-1 all he wants. If Jadine's able to get to multiple Treasure Cruises, it undoes a lot of his work. But now this is the problem. Jeskai Ascendancy's in play. It looks like it's unchecked. And now Evan is forced to try to damage race his way out of this, and that's going to be really hard to do.
Well, this is a start at least in Sorin's Solemn Visitor. Because pumping and attacking here, well, that's pretty good for Evan. He gets to gain some life and deal some damage, 6 of it to be exact. But Jadine might be fine with saying, okay, I'll take 6, you gain 6. I will now get to have a blast on my turn.
Yep, gets to probably kill Sorin. I mean, just with one spell, Sorin's gone. And now that Evan's committed his own Whirling Outburst to the table, she probably cares much less about walking into Anger of the Gods.
Well, here's 2 mana. And that is a Glare of Heresy. That's not bad either, so that'll pump up the jam on those goblins. They are 2 power creatures now. Sorin is off the table. Treasure Cruise gets discarded. Wow.
And if Jadine was willing to use a Glare here, when she could have otherwise just attacked, and is looting away a Treasure Cruise, I think that means she has another Treasure Cruise in hand. She was trying to find a land drop, build up her graveyard a little bit, and get to a copy of Treasure Cruise as soon as possible.
6 damage will come across. Land will come into play at 17-14 in favor of Kleinknecht right now. You see this kind of 1-for-1 removal stuff that he has in his hand right now as he plays a Bloodstained Mire. He's got Crackling Doom, Chain to the Rocks, and Murderous Cut. Some draws, that's very good against. Some draws, it's pretty bad against. Looks like it's pretty bad against this particular draw.
And even if he found some way to handle the tokens, he would still be way behind. Because again, Jadine's not going to have a bad draw for the rest of the game.
Chain of the Rocks will take care of the Goblin. And it looks like he's willing to cash in some of these removal spells now.
Well, he can't let Jadine go into next turn with a bunch of tokens in play in the Ascendancy. Things are looking bad for him, no matter what happens here, but I don't think the situation is tenable at all if he says to Jadine, all right, you have 3 tokens, go nuts.
An attack for 3 is going to bring Klomparens down to 11, but we have seen this before with Jeskai tokens. An active Jeskai Ascendancy is very, very difficult to beat, and she's going to keep the pressure on here, it looks like. Tapping some mana to play a copy of Seeker of the Way. May not be impressive to start, but it's probably better than you think here over the course of the next couple of turns.
Well, this is not that bad of a turn here for Evan, all things considered, if he's able to resolve this Crackling Doom. Because Jadine didn't do a ton this turn, but we've seen negate out of Jadine before, and this sort of feels like a negate might be coming again.
As you mentioned, it sort of feels like a Treasure Cruise may be coming soon too.
Yes.
So Evan's going to use his Urborg and delve 4 cards to cast Murderous Cut. And that Crackling Doom, yeah, I had a feeling that was supposed to be in his hand, so it looks like he revealed that one and gave away a little bit of information. So we're going to go back Kleinknecht's way now. He'll draw. Copy of Thoughtseize, not the worst draw. He will use that. Perhaps we get to see Klomparens' hand now.
Let's see the extent of the damage. I think this is not going to be pleasant for Evan to look at, but we shall see.
It'll be a Lightning Strike. Question is, where is it going? It's going to go after a Goblin token. Trigger, draw. Time to discard. We'll discard negate. Lightning Strike is done resolving. Goblins are untapped. Keep in mind, those are 2/2s right now. Treasure Cruise is going to bite the dust, leaving Klomparens with just a copy of Whirling Outburst, but not a bad card to have in this situation.
It at least gives Evan the hope of drawing Anger of the Gods or End Hostilities, then finding an answer for the Ascendancy, and then being able to play again.
Kraken will take care of one of those Goblin tokens. We're going to head back Klomparens' way. I'd say both players are playing at the top of the deck, but that's not necessarily true, since Jadine does have Jeskai Ascendancy, where Evan does not.
But she's doing a lot better than just drawing off the top.
3 mana being reached for here by Klomparens. It'll be a copy of Bramaz, King of Oreskos, and just a passing of the turn. Looked like maybe a Crackling Doom was the draw. No, Temple of Silence instead. Top card's going to become the bottom one here for Kleinknecht. He just has to pass the turn back. He's in a world of trouble now.
And now, not even Anger of the Gods is much help.
Now here's Whirling Outburst. That'll come pre-combat. Trigger Ascendancy, draw, discard. Shivan Reef is an easy one to discard. 3 goblins will come into play. Of course, Ascendancy does trigger, so creatures will get a little bit bigger. It's time to get into the red zone. Bramaz and that 2/2 goblin token will come in. And now there is a 1/1 with Vigilance. Bramaz will get chump block. 3 damage will come across. It's 8-9 in favor of Klomparens. Kleinknecht will draw a card. Sorin, Solemn Visitor. Could have been a good draw maybe a turn or 2 ago, but not great now.
Exactly. The ship has sailed on that sort of thing, and now it's just sweeper or bust.
But as you mentioned, Anger of the Gods is not the sweeper that we're looking for either.
Yeah, it would have to be end hostilities at this stage.
There is Sorin. The Solemn Visitor will make a vampire token, but that gets outclassed pretty easily on the board as well. Klomparens will draw. All it takes right now is probably just one more spell. These creatures can just get so big so quick. And that's what makes this deck such a tough one to beat.
I mean, it can beat you straight up. And then the games where you have Ascendancy, it's playing a different game of Magic than the other decks in Standard.
Klomparens deciding the best way to attack this turn. Does she want to go after Sorin? Does she want to go after Kleinknecht's life total? Again, life total's in favor of Klomparens right now. Board presence as well. Just looking to close this one out before something like End Hostilities does show up. So here are the attackers, excuse me. Now that goblin token will tap to attack. There we go. Everything else has vigilance. So there's some blockers. Sorin gonna bite the dust. Leads me to believe, of course, that Jadine doesn't have any spells in hand. I think she would have cast them.
Yeah, and I think that the reason to go after Sorin there is probably just the only thing that she's worried about happening at this stage is end hostilities.
And if End Hostilities plus leave a Planeswalker in play happens, it gets a little bit hairy then.
Right. I think she can afford to be really conservative because if she draws any spell, just too much damage happens. It's actually just straight up lethal.
Yeah. Sarkhan came down, took care of Bramaz. And for Evan, you're hoping that she never draws a spell. Well, she's keeping the card on top, so that's probably not a land. I would venture a guess. Here come the creatures. Sarkhan will bite the dust. A small exchange and a passing of the turn.
Yeah, just trying to split up the damage in such a way that, you know, you get to take care of the sword and deal some damage.
Kleinknecht draws. It's simple. Top card. Looks like it's going to stay on top. But with Jadine keeping a top card on.
Yeah, Evan's dead on board to a spell.
Yeah.
So, and she kept on top. So
She kept on top fast. So you have to imagine this is a spell, and it is, and Stoke the Flames, and that is going to do it. Jadine Klomparens is going to win this match here over Evan Kleinknecht. 2-1. Jeskai Tokens will take care of Mardu midrange, and for Jadine, a player that we have seen make the elimination rounds of Open Series events before, 6-0, off to a great start.
Yep, and you can see the problem in trying to play a removal-oriented game against a deck that has Jeskai Ascendancy. If you can't answer it, you need to do some incredibly powerful trumps to be able to keep your head above water. So a lot to be said of you have to build your deck in such a way where you can beat both the card Jeskai Ascendancy, you get it off the table, and then beat the secondary game plan of the deck. And because part of that secondary game plan is Treasure Cruise, it's asking a lot out of you.
It is, and I think that Jadine probably went back to the drawing board and changed some things up as far as sideboarding is concerned. Given, seeing exactly what Evan was up to in Game 2 and the Anger of the Gods and, having so much removal, it was time for her to change her plan. I think she did that.
Yeah, I think that's why you see the decks that have successful matchups have something like Doomweight Giant, which is really problematic for Jeskai tokens, alongside having a lot of ways to get Ascendancy off the table, either preemptively with Thoughtseize or after the fact with cards like Utter and Sultai Charm. You need a mix